Hey guys, in this video we're going to be covering Target 4A.1. Our mastery learning objective here is I can identify the x-intercept, y-intercept, and the vertex of the quadratic equation from a graph, table, and an equation. Alright, so just a quick recap. What is an x-intercept? X-intercept is where the graph crosses the horizontal axis. Alright, so a couple things to remember there. Horizontal is the axis that is going left to right. Okay? And our x-intercepts are typically written as a number, comma, 0, right? This is wherever y is equal to 0. So, when y equals 0. A lot of things to kind of remember, but we should definitely, this isn't the first time we've dealt with x-intercepts. Y-intercept is where the graph crosses the vertical axis. So our vertical axis is going to be the axis that is going up and down. Right, that is our y-axis. And then the way that we write our y-intercepts is 0, comma, and then some number, wherever it crosses that vertical axis. And this is whenever our x is 0. When x is 0. Obviously, we see that 0 as our ordered pair. Our vertex is going to be either the lowest or the highest point. So it is either or. It can't be both at the same time. So this is going to be the lowest or highest point on the parabola. So remember, when we are dealing with parabolas, lowest point is going to be that U opening upward. And wherever that vertex is the lowest point. Our highest point is the U opening downward. And that vertex is wherever that highest point is. You might also see that, or hear me reference the line of symmetry. So wherever that line of symmetry is, that's where it goes through the vertex. So that is going to give you that either highest or lowest point. Looking at these first couple of examples, these are the only three things I need you to tell me. So what is the x-intercept? X-intercept is wherever it crosses that horizontal axis, right? Horizontal axis is just going this way. So it does cross about right here. It looks to be about x equaling a 0.5. And over here, crossing through at x equals a negative 4.5. Alright, our y-axis, our y-intercept is going to be wherever it's intersecting that vertical axis. So it looks to be crossing about right here. So our y-intercept is going to be at a negative 1. Our vertex is either that lowest or highest point, so that's going to be that point right there. So therefore our vertex is an ordered pair, so in order to write this, I have to write negative 2, right? X comes first and then y, and a negative 3. This is also a minimum, so you can put a minimum as well. Alright, looking at example number 2, I have to state my x-intercept. So x-intercept is wherever it crosses that horizontal axis. So x is going to equal a negative 3, and x is also going to equal a positive 1. So those are your two x-intercepts. Our y-intercept is wherever it crosses that y-axis. So then our y-intercept is going to be y equaling a positive 6. And our vertex is wherever we see that highest or lowest point. This ends up being a max, right? It's the highest point. So therefore, our vertex our ordered pair for our vertex is -1, 8. Alright. Scrolling on down, we get to these examples where we have an equation and we have no graph. So hopefully you already have your graphing calculator with you. If not, go ahead and pause the video until you get your calculator. So, same steps for graphing. New document. No, you don't want to save. We want to go to number 2 where it says add graph. So typing this in, negative x, we have to square that, minus 2x plus 8. I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and I see my graph here. So what's nice is that my x-intercepts are easily visible. You can just count them. So that first one all the way to the left looks like -1, 2, 3, 4. So there's going to be a x-intercept here at a -4, as well as it looks like another one is at a +2. Our y-intercept, we kind of can't see that as well as our vertex, but what it does look like, it does look like it's going to be a maximum. So in order to find the max, we have to click menu. We want to do analyze graph, and then we're going to go down to where it says maximum. We get that little scrolly dotted line. So I just want to scroll somewhere all the way on the left side, click enter, scroll all the way over here on the right side, click enter, and I get this maximum right here of 1, 9. So that is going to be my vertex. Looks like it's at a -1, 9. So over -1, up 9, 7, 8, 9. And I have to figure out where my y-intercept is going to be at. So kind of multiple ways that we can do this. We're going to work on where that intercept is on my y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and click menu. So once we click menu, we want to go down to number 5. It says trace. And once we click trace, you're going to go ahead and click graph trace. This is going to allow you to type in any x value that you want, and it's going to tell you what that y value is. So I want to know whenever x is a 0. So I'm just going to type in 0 and click enter. And it gives me this point down here, like in the right, if you can see that little cursor, that when x is 0, my y is an 8. Okay, so my y-intercept then is going to be up at a +8 because 0, 8 was where that overall function was coming from. We can go ahead and draw our graph, and we can go ahead and move on to the next equation. Alright, so let's plug in example number 4. You could go and click Control G and tab up and just delete whatever you had there. If you don't like doing that, you could also go home, new document. No, we never want to save, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in my new function, which is x squared plus 2x plus 5. Make sure I type that in right. Go ahead and click my enter. So now here I don't see any x-intercepts. So there's no x-intercept, but I do see some y's, and I do see my vertex. So this looks like it's also going to be a minimum, but just so I can figure out exactly what that is, if you can count, that's fine. If you want to make sure, you can always do analyze graph, go to that minimum. We want to scroll left and scroll right, so I'm going to move my cursor to the left, click enter, move it to the right, click enter, and I do see this point right here that is -1, 4. Again, these are the same steps as what we were doing before, so they should not be any new. This would be -1, 4. -1, 4 is right here. It looks like it's intercepting my y-axis at 5, but just to practice that, we're going to go ahead and click menu, go down to number 5 where it says trace, graph trace. I'm going to type in that 0, which it already kind of knows what I'm looking for. And again, down here it tells me exactly what point it intersects. So my y-intercept is at a +5. So 0, 5 is where that's intercepting my y-axis, and then I can just go ahead and graph the best that I can. The other thing is we know that this is a minimum, and example number 3 was a maximum. Okay, now let's look at some of these examples when we have a table. So a table, a little bit different. X-intercept, y-intercept are still the same, right? So x-intercept is whenever my y is equal to 0. So just to kind of write that out for ourselves, right? So x-intercept, this is when y equals 0. So looking at our table here, our y is going to be our second column. So this is my x, this is my y. In order to find my x-intercept, I have to find wherever my y is equal to a 0. So I see one right here. So this means that I have an x-intercept at a -6. And I also see one over here. Right, so that means I have an x-intercept at 0. So again, it's whenever my y is equal to a 0. That's going to give me my x-intercept. Looking at my y-intercept, this is when x equals 0. So for this one, where does my x equal 0? It seems to be at this point right here. So I also have an x-intercept, or I mean a y-intercept at y equaling 0. Alright, the vertex. Now the vertex is two ways of solving for this. So one, you could find the lowest point. So looking at my y's, what is the lowest point that it goes? And I see this one right here, right? This is my lowest point. That's the smallest y value. And if I look at the highest y value, so it looks to be that 16 is my highest value. Our vertex either has to be the highest or the lowest point, and it needs to be in the center of our table, right? Because we need to see that that pattern of that symmetry, and that comes from finding that value that's in the center of the table. So our vertex actually is going to be this point right here. So our vertex is going to be at point -3, -9. Now I like to look at patterns. I think patterns helps me kind of see, makes it look more like a parabola. And what you start noticing with our y values is that I see patterns right here. I see this 7 with the 7. I see this 0 with that 0. I see that -5 with -5, that -8, -8, and all of a sudden my 9 doesn't have a pattern. So what that means is that this is going to be the lowest point, and our parabola is going to open up this way. This is our lowest point because all those other points are going to be going up on our graph, on our parabola opening up upwards. So whether you want to find the lowest or the highest point, or you like to look at the pattern, either way will get you to the vertex. All right, so let's look at example number 2. So I'm going to start off with my x-intercepts. X-intercept is whenever my y value is equal to a 0. So I'm looking at my y's, I see y equals 0 here, and I see a y equaling 0 here. So therefore, my x is going to be at a -3, and x equaling a +1. My new y-intercept is whenever my x is equal to 0. So x is going to be, I only see 1 this time, so therefore my y-intercept is going to be y equaling a +3. And my vertex, so again, either labeling the lowest or the highest point. So I see the lowest, low, low, low. I see this -21. That's going to be my lowest point. That's at the end of my graph. And the highest point looks actually to be 4. So we're going to have a maximum. And our vertex is going to be at this point right here, at my -1, 4. Right? And again, if you were to look for that pattern, we start seeing, well, I see a 3 and a 3 here. and I see a 0 and a 0 here. Obviously, these tables keep going up forever and down forever, right? This is just a snapshot of a little bit of our table. So those are the 3 things I need you to label. That is from my x-intercept, y-intercept, from a table, from a graph, from an equation that we have to graph. So you can go ahead and try this first activity and move on to activity 4A.1. All right, good luck.